Do you feel trapped inside your own mind? A constant storm of worries and anxiety that just won't stop. What if I told you peace isn't somewhere out there? It's waiting inside you, and you can discover it today. Aisha sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor, her fingers tapping nervously against her thighs. The sunlight barely pierced through the heavy curtains, casting the room in a dull, gray haze. Her phone buzzed again, a message she couldn't bring herself to open. Her chest felt tight, and each breath seemed heavier than the last, as if her body had absorbed all the weight of her racing thoughts. She tried to focus on the small tasks scattered around her apartment, the dishes in the sink, the laundry piled high, but nothing could anchor her mind. Every time she thought she could take a moment of calm, a new worry crept in, sharper and louder than before. What if she failed at work? What if she disappointed everyone who counted on her? What if she never found peace again? The questions circled endlessly, gnawing at her from all sides. She tried to push them away, telling herself she was overreacting, that this was just a phase, that she was strong enough to handle it. But the more she tried to fight, the more relentless the storm inside her became. At work, she forced herself to smile, to nod along during meetings, but her mind drifted to the 100 little things she hadn't finished, the responsibilities waiting to pull her under. Her coworkers asked if she was okay, but she couldn't admit how suffocating it felt, how powerless she felt against the constant swirl of worries. It wasn't just stress. It was a feeling that her own mind had turned against her, that she was trapped in a cage made of thoughts she couldn't control. At night, when the world grew quiet, the anxiety didn't pause. In the dark, every tiny sound became amplified, every memory replayed, every imagined failure felt real. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to control her racing heart, willing herself to sleep, willing herself to stop thinking, but it never worked. Each breath seemed shallow, each thought sharper, and the room felt smaller with every passing hour. She wondered if anyone else felt this way, if anyone else knew the exhausting weight of being trapped inside your own mind. It was isolating, a silent battle she fought alone, one that made her feel invisible even in a room full of people. Her hands shook as she reached for a notebook, attempting to write down the swirling thoughts, hoping that putting them on paper might quiet them for a moment. Words came haltingly, fragmented, reflecting the chaos inside her. She paused, closed her eyes, and realized she couldn't even remember the last time she had felt calm, truly calm. That simple peace, the kind of quiet that lets you breathe without tension, seemed distant, almost imaginary. And in that moment, as frustration mixed with despair, she finally acknowledged it. This storm, this constant barrage of worries, wasn't a sign of weakness or failure. It was real, and the first step toward finding any relief was to recognize it, to admit to herself that she was struggling and that it mattered. The next morning, Aisha stepped outside, unsure of what she was searching for. The air felt crisp, and sunlight spilled over the park in warm, golden patches. She walked slowly, her mind still heavy with yesterday's anxieties, but something about the quiet of the morning called to her. She found an empty bench beneath a sprawling oak tree and hesitated before sitting, her fingers brushing against the rough wood. Across the path, an elderly man was scattering breadcrumbs for the birds, his movements gentle and deliberate. He looked up, catching her gaze, and gave a soft smile. Aisha felt a flicker of connection, though she wasn't sure why. "Troubled?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying an ease she hadn't felt in days. She nodded almost imperceptibly, unsure if she wanted to speak. "I feel like my mind won't stop, like I'm trapped," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded knowingly, as if he had expected her answer. He gestured toward the birds pecking at the crumbs. "You see them. They don't worry about what comes next, they just focus on the moment. That's all peace asks of us. Not perfection, not solving everything, just noticing what is." Aisha stared at the birds, their small movements calming somehow. She breathed in slowly, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the tension in her shoulders ease, even just a little. The man didn't lecture. He didn't offer a quick solution or promise instant relief. He simply reminded her that sometimes, peace comes not from conquering the storm in a single blow, but from learning to stand in it, to notice the small things that anchor us. Aisha tried it, focusing on her breath, on the warmth of the sun on her skin, the sound of leaves rustling overhead. A subtle shift occurred, a crack in the wall of worry she had built around herself. Over the next few days, she returned to the park, gradually experimenting with these small acts of mindfulness. She noticed the smell of morning dew, the sound of distant laughter, the feel of her feet on the grass. She kept a notebook, jotting down one thing she observed each day, one small moment that made her feel alive. She began to see that peace didn't come from escaping her responsibilities or silencing her worries completely, but from choosing to inhabit her present experience fully, even when her thoughts were loud. She discovered that even a few minutes of noticing, really noticing, could interrupt the storm in her mind. At work, she started incorporating these moments, a pause to breathe before responding to an email, a brief walk outside to feel the sun on her face. She felt a quiet confidence growing, a recognition that she had tools she could reach for when anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. The transformation wasn't dramatic, but it was steady, real, and sustainable. The birds in the park, the oak tree, the simple acts of being present became her teachers, showing her that inner peace wasn't distant or mysterious. It was accessible, waiting in the quiet moments she had been overlooking all along. Aisha began to notice subtle changes in herself. She woke up earlier, not because she had to, but because she wanted to feel the quiet of the morning before the world demanded her attention. She started journaling, writing down her thoughts not to solve them immediately, but simply to acknowledge them, to give them a place outside her mind. Each day, the small routines she once overlooked, a warm cup of tea, a short walk, a few deep breaths, became acts of reclaiming herself, reminders that she could choose calm even in the midst of chaos. She realized that peace was not something to chase frantically, but something to nurture, patiently and intentionally. At work, she felt the difference immediately. The emails that had once overwhelmed her no longer dictated the rhythm of her day. She paused before responding, letting herself take a breath, letting herself think clearly. Conversations with colleagues became easier. She laughed at small jokes, noticed the subtle warmth in casual greetings, and felt a connection she hadn't thought possible a few weeks ago. Even her interactions with her family changed. She listened more deeply, spoke more gently, and found that the anxious tension that had clouded every moment was loosening. Her brother noticed it first, a quiet smile when she picked up the phone to check in, a calm tone in her voice. The real transformation, however, came in the moments when anxiety tried to return, when old worries knocked at the door of her mind. Before, she would have been swept away by the storm, trapped in endless what-ifs. Now she recognized the familiar signs, the racing thoughts, the shallow breath, the sudden tightness in her chest, and instead of fighting, she responded differently. She paused, observed, and breathed. She let the storm pass through, acknowledging it without letting it define her. In those moments, she discovered a strength she hadn't realized she possessed. The power to choose presence over panic, awareness over fear, calm over chaos. Even the smallest victories mattered. Watching the sunrise, hearing birdsong, savoring a quiet cup of tea. These weren't grand gestures, but they were proof that peace could exist, that it could be felt in simple ways. Aisha realized that it wasn't about eliminating anxiety entirely, but about changing her relationship with it. She learned to see herself not as a victim of her thoughts, but as someone capable of navigating them with grace, compassion, and patience. The storm might return, but she now had the tools to face it without losing herself, without losing hope. One afternoon, as she sat by the window, sunlight spilling across her notebook, she smiled genuinely. Her hands no longer trembled with tension. She felt grounded, alive, and deeply present. In that quiet moment, she understood something profound. Inner peace was never distant, never unreachable. It was a choice she made every day, in every breath, in every mindful pause. And that choice, small and deliberate, transformed not only her mind but her life, showing her that even after the darkest storms, calm and clarity could bloom, waiting patiently for those willing to notice and embrace it. Disclaimer: this video is for informational and motivational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional mental health advice. If you are struggling with severe anxiety or depression, please consult a licensed professional.